Good morning. So this morning I wanted to talk about the compound effect and how it interacts with the fractal productivity model of divergence and convergence. So the calendar-based convergent aspect of the system and the divergent-based task and project development aspect of the system I've talked about elsewhere. And so right now what I'm thinking about myself and how I'm pushing the envelope of the system a little bit to improve it is, now that I've figured out for myself with the mix of internal and external characteristics of my life, where I have more control now because I'm doing the work myself as opposed to project management, and I work really well in the time chunking paradigm. So I like creating time chunks for things, mapping out my week, and then looking deeper and deeper into my week by asking several questions about it. So I've talked about all that elsewhere on other videos. Now I have around 25 to 30 hours of undesignated margin in my week by the time that I have mapped out what I'm going to do for work this week and what are the urgent and important things I need to get done and commitments I have made. By the time I've answered those questions, I'm usually left with about 25 to 30 hours of daytime time that I can decide what I'm going to do with. And so then I have a series of questions that I ask myself as far as what am I going to do with that, like what are important but not urgent things that I can work on and kind of get ahead on for future projects or future milestones, and what's important to me right now. And then once I've answered several questions, the final types of questions are, what do I want to do? I still have 10 to 12 hours left when all's said and done. What do I want to do with this week? Whether it's do something with my family, or play Fortnite, or whatever, read a book, whatever it is. And then I usually leave 5 to 6 hours of time undesignated. All right, so in that time frame, when I still have 25 to 30 hours of work, 25 hours of margin left after I've answered the kind of urgent and important questions, I want to start interacting with the compound effect with that time. So I've been thinking about it, but then I watched this video by Ali Hassad, I think his name is, that we've been talking about on the general group some, on the workflow user group. And he was talking about that for him, he had decided after, I think he said maybe his late 20s or something now, but since he was like 13 or 14, he's been actively trying to figure out how to do business online. So he's created a bunch of different models and tried them out. They'd all, I guess, failed, but so that was one of his flywheels. That was this thing he kept on pushing on, was trying to create a business online. Of course, every time he did that, he learned more and more about how to do it. He learned how to fail. He learned what didn't work, but also was acquiring skills and talents and equipment that he dumped into the next trial. And he tried that and it failed, but each time that flywheel spun, he was a little further ahead. And then he decided that he was going to make YouTube content targeting a certain niche group, and then his flywheel, or I look at it as a flywheel, was he made 2 quality content videos, edited them and posted them to YouTube every week. And it took him several years before he got any traction in terms of audience. It actually went fairly rapidly relative to the average, but he kept on pushing. So he was filling, if he was in my paradigm with fractal productivity and had these 25 to 30 hours of free time after he'd gotten his work done and the things he was required to do, he decided that he was going to use several hours each evening to create content, edit it, and post it. And so he just did that week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. And after, can't remember what the exact time frame was from the time he started, but after a few years, he started to get an audience, and he was explaining in that video what his income, and it was low. I mean, he was making his money as a doctor, but his income generated by the content was low, but he kept on doing the same thing over and over and over again, week in, week out, with his margin. And then he got traction, and then he started to make enough money to be equal to what he was making as a doctor. And then this past year in 2020, he actually exceeded £1 million, or like $1.3 million in income, but he's still essentially doing the same thing. It's just the compound effect. So I'd already been kind of thinking about it, but that really clarified I've got this 25 to 30 hours a week. What do I want to do with a portion of that time each week? As kind of a compass, but headed in a particular direction, and then start investing that time with the hope, with the intent, with the goal that eventually that will have an effect, whatever it is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to money, but something that creates more margin, which could be money, but it could also be energy, or kind of mental capacity, or throughput capacity in terms of Scrum, story points. And so that's where I'm right at. That's at the cutting edge of what I'm thinking about and have been thinking about. It could be writing. Maybe I want to write 2 hours a day on a couple of books and other books that I may write in the future to create some manuscripts, so that eventually I have a body of work that I could potentially publish, get an agent for, and publish. So I'm actually feeling a little angsty right now, because I feel like I don't know what a good answer to that is. I think I could come up with 50 good answers, but trying to decide what's the one or two things I would decide that I want to actually block off that will no longer be margin. It will be the resources of time, focus, and energy applied in a particular direction towards a particular goal. So it's no longer margin at that point. It's being consumed by a process towards a goal. And so I'm feeling a little bit grumpy, which I always am when I feel kind of disoriented. And so I have this disorientation of what is it I should be doing. And so I'm in the process of kind of brainstorming possibilities, seeing what I might get alignment on, with my family. That would be a good thing in terms of family goals and fit in with our family schedule and not interrupt some good things going on there. And so I'm feeling a little bit grumpy because I've discovered this freedom, and I'm trying to decide what to do with it. But I want to use part of it in a way that has a compound effect over time, potentially. Of course, that's a prediction. It's not a guarantee. But I think to some extent, if you continue to push in a certain direction, you may not end up at the destination you planned on, but you'll end up in a different place, a place with a kind of that's more expansive, regardless of whether I hit a particular destination. So, for example, if I decide as a goal is that I want to publish 3 books in the next 10 years or 20 years, and so I start writing 2 hours a day and researching the publishing industry and researching agents and getting, networking, joining organizations, going to conferences, all of those things. In 10 years, I might still not have a book published, but I'll be a different person. I'll be someone who's written thousands of hours and knows an industry better. And so I may, not use that in the end to actually get books published, but I could use it, to use that writing in another direction other than getting the books published or whatever. So that's what I mean by that. So I'm just trying to figure out what is a really good use of my time. So then I can just say, okay, every Tuesday night and every Thursday night or whatever, I'm going to set aside these 2 hours here and 3 hours here. So that's going to be 5 hours. That's no longer margin in my life. It's already pre-designated. So anyway, there you go. Compound effect and fractal productivity. Once you discover some margin, deciding how best to use it. And for me, in kind of a compounding effect is one of my personal goals. So there you go. Hope that's helpful.